After dark, if someone calls you from behind, don't look back. New Testament Proverbs. After a 2-day transoceanic voyage, Sean Dickinson stepped off the Golden Age cruise ship and set foot on the land of the Newlander Commonwealth for the first time in his life. The sky will be late, and the rain will continue. In the distance, under the gloomy sky, the roof of the Divine Kingdom building plunged straight into the clouds, like the pillars of heaven and earth. The raindrops hit the umbrella above and made a crisp sound. Sean walked forward, shoes carefully away from the puddle. The slightly fishy sea breeze mixed with the muddy taste. The street outside the pier was a little quiet. When Sean looked around with an umbrella, a black taxi stopped in front of him. The driver, a fat man in his 50s who looked very kind, looked at Sean through the window, with a reassuring smile on his face. "Holy Father bless you, sir. It looks like you need a ride." Sean sighed. "Fortunately, you came in time." The driver got out of the car in the rain, took the travel bag, opened the back seat door, and let Sean get into the car. Sean felt warmer. Returning to the driver's seat, the driver started the vehicle and muttered, "The weather this year is really hell. It's raining so much." "Where are you going?" "The Fog and Rose Hotel." "Do you know where it is?" "Yes, on 9th Avenue. The Ford car slowly drove out of the dock area. Sean looked out the car window. It was getting dark quickly, and the bustling and blurred side of the metropolis gradually woke up. The man in the suit sat on the high chair and let the boy in the peaked cap attentively polish his shoes. The man struck a match, lit a cigarette, and the flames instantly illuminated his angular face. Under the neon sign of Dorothy Nightclub, a small band of 3 is playing jazz. The black trumpet player is very engaged, the old leather shoes are beat on the ground, and the bulging cheeks are shiny. The huge movie poster was illuminated by spotlights, and the poster depicted a man with a mustache in a bowler hat. He smiled at passers-by in an ill-fitting suit, JoJo's first sound film Modern Times. I don't know if he was hallucinating or not. Out of the corner of the eye, Sean noticed that JoJo on the poster blinked and looked again, but his expression was still fixed. "Are you from Leon?" The driver George glanced at Sean in the rearview mirror. Pulled back by George's voice, Sean nodded, knowing that the other party could hear his accent. "New York City is a good place." George smiled. "Young people like you should go out and walk more." "I'm not here to play." "What are you here for?" "Are you here to talk business?" Taxi drivers love to chat, and George is no exception. Sean sighed, "I'm here to find someone." "A debtor?" George raised his eyebrows with a smile on the corner of his mouth. "Or a lover?" After a little hesitation, Sean decided to tell the truth. "I'm here to find my sister. She came to New York City a month ago, and it's been over 10 days that she hasn't heard from her." The smile on George's face faded. "Sorry, I think you should report a case to the precept's office, and go to the newspaper to post a missing person notice or something." "What's your sister's name?" "Maybe I can help you find out." Sean said solemnly, "Aria Dickinson." "Aria?" After George muttered softly, the carriage fell silent. "It's foggy." Turning his eyes out of the car window again, Sean was a little surprised. The streets and neon lights that were originally clear have now been wrapped in thick fog and become ambiguous. The noise in the street also became dull. George sighed, "This ghost weather." The fog was so thick that only the tail lights of the car in front could be seen. The traffic started to be congested, the taxi could only move slowly, and the urging whistle sounded constantly in the traffic flow, which made Sean feel a little irritable. George patted his forehead. "There is a parade on Central Avenue tonight, I forgot." "Celebration parade?" George turned around. "Celebrating the first anniversary of the lifting of prohibition. Do these lunatics come every year?" The taxi was stuck in the stagnant traffic, and in the thick fog ahead, there were faint sounds of music and people singing. "I won't be able to walk for a while." George patted the steering wheel. Sean looked at his watch. How far is it from the hotel? It's not far, turn 2 blocks, and you can get there in 10 minutes. Okay. Sean glanced at the meter, it showed 57 cents, he counted out a 60-cent coin and handed it to George. Don't look for it. Sean got out of the car and closed the door, took the travel bag, and walked to the sidewalk. George shouted from behind, God will bless area. Sean turned back, the thick fog had covered George's face. Thank you. In response, Sean walked onto the sidewalk. The foggy day was cloudy and cold, Sean wrapped his coat tightly and walked towards the hustle and bustle. After walking for about 5 minutes, the fog dissipated abruptly, and the street became bright again. The shredded paper flowers fluttered in the air, like shining snow falling. A marching band played cheerful music, people dressed in beautiful clothes, surrounded a large flower basket in the shape of a wine bottle, cheering and walking. Some sang and danced, some hugged and kissed, and some looked at each other and laughed. There was joy on people's faces. Sean looked a little out of place. He erected his collar and walked silently, just wanting to hurry to the hotel to rest. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Perhaps it was this sense of detachment that made passers-by look sideways at Sean, who was in a hurry. Sensing that someone wanted to talk to him and didn't want to waste time, Sean quickened his pace. Bang! Just as he accelerated, Sean bumped into someone hidden. I'm sorry. Sean looked up while apologizing. The person I bumped into was a young lady with beautiful curly chestnut hair, beautiful facial features, delicate makeup, and a light yellow dress. She was the kind of young beauty who could be seen in a crowd. The girl in front of her looked at Sean, her red lips slightly parted, showing a very surprised expression. The surprise passed away in a flash, and her expression returned to normal immediately. She grabbed Sean and walked with him. Being close to a beautiful girl will naturally make a man happy, but Sean asked cautiously, what is this for? The girl's expression seemed to be just hanging out with her boyfriend. Be natural, don't look at or talk to the people next to you, just follow me. Sean tries to understand what's going on. Are you in trouble? No, you are in trouble. Is someone following me? Sean was a little nervous and instinctively wanted to look around. The girl quickly tugged at his arm. Be natural. Sean was a little annoyed. What's going on? The girl still kept smiling, as if she was just chatting with Sean. Next, please do as I say. Because. After listening to the second half of the sentence, Sean, who was originally a little sullen, looked at the girl's blue eyes that flashed earnestly in an instant, and was so shocked that he was speechless, because on this street, only the two of us are alive. The color bars were still dancing in the air, the drums and trumpets of the band were so distinct, and the laughter were close to my ears. The little girl passing by held her parents' hands, her eyes sparkling. The only two of us are alive on this street. Sean frowned, staring at the woman beside him with grotesque words and deeds. What do you mean by that? The woman still had that unpredictable smile. Literally, except for us, everyone else is dead. Sean was mentally prepared before he set foot on Newlander, a country full of strange legends, but what the woman in front of him said was completely beyond his imagination. After being sluggish for a few seconds, Sean was still unacceptable. You stop joking. The woman was neither anxious nor angry. See for yourself. She looked lovingly and took off the colored strips on the brim of Sean's hat, took the opportunity to sweep his palms over his eyes, and read a spiritual word between her lips and teeth, Neru. Sean's vision suddenly changed color, becoming depressed and grey, as if he was in a place of despair. After seeing the scene in front of him, Sean's jaw slackened in shock. On the grey street, the people who were dressed in bright clothes and had happy expressions all turned into gloomy bodies and chaotic faces. Resentful spirits. The festive music was also replaced by grotesque and terrifying screams. This is not a celebration team, but a group of grievances. Sean remembered what the woman said before. He quickly covered his mouth. lowered the brim of his hat, and covered his eyes. The resentful spirit passing by noticed the frightened look in his eyes just now and turned his eyes to the side. Sean just felt the distorted face of the resentful spirit from the corner of his eye, and he was already in a cold sweat. The woman held Sean and continued walking quickly. The truth is not necessarily beautiful. In order to allow Sean to manage his expression, the woman wiped Sean's eyes again, so that he could see the bright and lively streets again. Sean was no longer able to stay in the crowd calmly, couldn't look directly at any passers-by around him, he could only stare at the eyes of the woman beside him. What's going on? The woman remained calm. My name is Catherine. Your name? Sean. Sean, how did you get in here? Where do you enter? This street? I took a taxi to this neighborhood, and I got off and walked because of the traffic jam. Did anything strange happen in between? Sean remembered the dense fog that filled his eyes. Suddenly, it's foggy, a lot of fog. That's the appearance of being shuttled to the spiritual realm. Catherine's eyes became serious. I can see at a glance that you are a stunned young man without any mysterious knowledge. Someone wants to kill you, and deliberately led you to this place. In a high-risk world. A high-risk spiritual room. The two had already passed the large party of the celebration, and the crowd around them gradually thinned out. Sean looked up and could see the thick fog at the other end of the block. The conversation kept Sean focused and not showing fear, so Catherine continued, the people of this celebration team died in an accident a year ago, and their grudges lingered on the earth, forming a place in this neighborhood. In the spirit room full of resentment, the scene of the day was repeatedly interpreted. Ordinary people have no way to enter here. You must have been brought in by someone. Sean's eyes flashed the driver George's face, which was covered by the thick fog. It's the taxi driver. Catherine was non-committal, letting Sean think for himself. The thick fog was about 100 meters ahead, and it seemed that she could leave the place through the thick fog, but her face was not easy. Sean was confused. Why did he do this? You can only find the answer yourself. Catherine's face was as expressionless as a doll, and her voice became colder and colder. The will of the spirit will find that we are about to escape, and it will try to trap us in here, digest our intellect and soul. Something weird will happen next. Don't look back, don't run, follow me into the fog ahead, and we can leave here. Sean hummed. Catherine changed from the relaxed state just now, and became very strict, even a little anxious. Don't look back, don't run. Sean was a little surprised by Catherine's state, and nodded clearly. The hustle and bustle behind him was suddenly mixed with a discordant voice. Someone seemed to chase after the crowd. It's over there. Sir, I saw the witch grab him with my own eyes. Hurry up and stop those two people. Hearing the movement behind her, Catherine, who held Sean, couldn't help but quicken her steps. The footsteps of chasing were getting closer, and someone shouted from behind, for the sake of the Holy Father, leave that woman. She is a witch. Witch? Sean looked at Catherine beside him with a hint of panic. I saw Catherine lowered her head, her eyes obscured by shadows. She stopped talking, just kept walking with Sean towards the fog ahead. www.mtlnovel.com. Sean. Leave her now. Sean was startled. He almost turned his head instinctively, but he managed to hold back. It was the voice of the old driver George. I just saw you, so I called the education officer to come after you. She's a witch. No matter what she says, don't believe it, don't be deceived by her spells. We can't force you to separate you, we can only rely on your own will. Sean turned his head in horror and looked at Catherine, who became strange beside him. In my mind, countless scenes are constantly changing. George, whose face was blocked by the fog, Catherine, who was surprised after being hit by him, the cheerful people on the street, the thick fog that filled the moment, and the street that suddenly became desolate and dilapidated in the field of vision. What exactly is real? Who is the liar? What should I do? Countless questions gushed out like bubbles of soda. causing Sean's mind to burst into pain. "No, look back." Catherine's voice turned into a sinister smoky voice, "No, trust them." At this time, the skin on Catherine's face was torn inch by inch, revealing the true appearance of rough tree bark under the skin. Sean knew that he had been deceived and was going to be kidnapped by the witch, so he had to turn around and shout, "George, save!" Before "save me" was finished, Sean's throat froze in fear. Behind him, there are no priests, George, or enthusiastic people. It is a collection of resentment that is gathered by countless resentful spirits and almost fills the entire street. Countless chaotic faces make up its surface, and the mouths of several faces are still simulating the voices of George and others. "Sean, come back. Don't trust her." Beside her, Catherine, who was completely naked, roared, "You idiot!" After seeing the scene behind him, Sean's blood went cold. "I was deceived by the resentful spirit." He turned his head and looked directly at the true face of the resentful spirits. According to the rules of the spirit, Sean's soul will be taken away by the resentful spirits and become part of the collective of resentful spirits forever. Catherine had no way to save her, so she could only let go of the hand that was holding him, and rushed into the fog alone. Behind Sean, a collection of resentful spirits surged like a tide, transforming into a giant mouth that swallowed and wrapped Sean's figure. Sean felt as if he was in the middle of the storm, and countless sharp howls sounded in his ears, and he even saw some visions. The celebration team walked forward joyfully, and the huge bottle-shaped flower baskets burst, releasing corrosive gas. The cheerful team suddenly screamed in panic. Some people were festering because of the corrosive gas, screaming and scratching in the crowd. The sound of the band was too loud, and the people outside felt very slow to wake up. While some people were screaming and pushing, others stretched their heads and looked in. The people killed by the poison gas fell directly to the ground. The people who had not been poisoned began to flee desperately. The crowd screamed and trampled in panic, and the number of deaths was increasing. In the tide of resentment, Sean felt that the world was spinning, as if the soul was about to leave the body. Under the strong impact, a palm-sized symbol appeared in his body. The symbol was like a strangely shaped candlestick, or some kind of ancient honor weapon. It glowed faintly and firmly fixed the soul in Sean's body, even if the impact of the resentful spirit failed to take away his soul. Sean didn't know what happened. He rushed into the thick fog regardless. As if plunged into the water, the whistling sound of the resentful spirit behind him became chaotic. The thick fog was as thick as water. Not only could Sean not be able to see what was close at hand, but he even found it difficult to breathe. He could only walk forward by feeling. D. Suddenly, the dazzling lights flashed before his eyes, and the driver hurriedly turned the steering wheel to bypass Sean, who suddenly appeared in the middle of the road, leaving a string of curses behind. The rain was continuous, and the colors of the real world were much more depressed and heavier than the fantasy scene just now. On the gloomy street, people looked at Sean, who suddenly appeared in the middle of the road. Not far away, Catherine found that Sean had actually walked out of the spiritual realm, and her face had returned to the original state with surprise. "Why haven't you been taken away by the resentful spirit?" "I don't know." Before Sean finished speaking, Catherine pulled him to the sidewalk and said, "The rules of the spirit are extremely powerful." You turned your head and looked directly at the body of the resentful spirit. Unless you are aching, the explorers above the level should become a member of the resentful spirit at this time. Sean was stunned at the moment, and Catherine carefully discerned Sean's micro-expressions. She was an explorer with the function of actor in the artist pedigree, and could easily see through other people's acting skills. Knowing nothing, Xiu Mu couldn't help but be a little lost. This is not reasonable. They were back on the sidewalk at the moment, remembering what happened in the spiritual world. Catherine pointed at Sean angrily, "Did I tell you not to look back?" Under the street light, Catherine's blue eyes widened, and her red lips were pursed into a serious line at this moment. Sean, who had always been a little confused, breathed a sigh of relief at this moment. He was a little helpless to Catherine's anger, but your face and voice just became very strange. That's the illusion that the will of the spirit gave me, the illusion. In order to save an ordinary person who had strayed into the spirit, not only did her mission not complete, but she almost lost her life. As a professional explorer, Catherine was so annoyed. Looking at Sean's slightly innocent expression, she realized that it is impossible for an ordinary person to face the strange power and not be confused, and her anger subsided a little. She let go of her hand and tried to calm her mood and tone. Be careful in New York City, there are always weird things happening here. She patted her clothes and tidied up her appearance a little. I have other things to do, so I'll go first. Don't tell anyone that you haven't been robbed of your soul. Then, I'm an employee of Gring Quest, and I suggest you come and see me sometime later. What happens to you is very rare, and it's best not to ignore it. After the mysterious symbol in Sean's body was activated, it existed forever. He nodded while looking inward. Catherine left a good-for-herself look, turned around and left, blending into the cold night rain and the crowd. Sean stood dumbfounded on the street in the light rain, feeling that the experience just now seemed like a nightmare. This is the Newlander of weirdness? What happened on the first night? If I knew it was so dangerous here, I wouldn't agree to let Arya come alone. Sean took out a mechanical pocket watch specially selected for this trip, and opened it with a click. One side was the face, and the hands pointed to 8:15, the long brown braids were coiled behind her head, restraining her original youthful and playful atmosphere, showing her dignified and quiet side. Aaliyah. Sean muttered in his heart as he looked at Aaliyah's smiling eyes in the photo. This pocket watch with Aaliyah's photo was given to him by his sister. Wherever you go, you can't forget your family, wherever you go, you can't forget your conscience. Sean remembered that on the white birthday card that came with the watch, there were 2 sentences written in Arya Zhuangzihu. Thinking of all the things his family had together, Sean couldn't help but smile in the light rain. But that smile soon faded away. A month ago, Aaliyah, who was famous for her poetry writing, received an invitation letter from the Newlander Poetry Association, asking her to visit and communicate with the association. Aaliyah, who has never been abroad, yearns for New Zealand, where outstanding poets are born in large numbers, but her family had their own affairs at the time. In order to ensure the safety of her journey, Sean asked a friend of his own to go with her, but that friend suddenly came before departure. With a high fever, Aaliyah, who has already bought the ticket, can only embark on this exotic journey alone. After all, Newlander is a country ruled by law, and it is not a dangerous journey for an adult woman to go. So, although Arya went alone, Sean wasn't overly worried. I even feel that traveling alone can train my younger sister who has never traveled far. For safety's sake, Sean asked her to send a telegram to her family with a brief description of the trip every 3 days. A few days before I arrived, I had received telegrams from Aaliyah, but 5 days later, my sister, who was traveling far away, suddenly disappeared. The feeling of waiting for the news was extremely torturous, and Sean couldn't sit still, so he left what he was doing, booked a ferry ticket, and came to Newlander. When he arrived here, Arya had been disconnected for 10 days. The longer it takes to lose the news, the more disturbing it becomes. Before, Sean just guessed what trouble Arya encountered. When he encountered the danger just now, he was almost certain. The taxi driver who brought me into the spiritual world made a special trip to pick me up. George's words sounded in Sean's mind. What are you here for? Are you here to talk about business? He took my words and made sure that I was the unlucky guy who came to find my sister. Then, he introduced me into the spirit room located on Zhongyang Avenue. Such a careful and vicious plan is definitely not a temporary initiative, and it is definitely not something that ordinary people can do. They are likely to be an organization. An organization with mysterious power, powerful intelligence capabilities, and ruthless behavior. What does this organization have to do with Arya's disappearance? Did they kidnap Arya? Why do they want to get rid of me? What threat do I have to them? There is no answer. www.mtlnovel.com. Continuing to think, there is only a fog ahead. An uneasy feeling filled his heart, and Sean could only look inward at the candlestick-shaped symbol that allowed him to escape from the spiritual world. It was silent now, but still shimmered constantly, giving him peace of mind. It's the power that keeps my soul, but I can feel that the symbol doesn't last long under that fiery shock. To stabilize my soul, fortunately at that time, I rushed into the thick fog because of panic, otherwise, I would inevitably lose my soul. Sean realized that in order to protect himself and find area, he could only rely on this mysterious symbol of temporarily unknown origin. What is this? Why is it in my body? Why can it stabilize my soul? Is its existence the reason why that organization attacked me? Sean scrutinized its details repeatedly, and the faint light reflected own soul. But the answer is still in the fog. Knowledge, I need more knowledge. Sean has never been so eager for mysterious knowledge. A huge threat, but also a huge motivation. Catherine's last look flashed in front of Sean's eyes, explorer, Guling Quest Company. He knew that if he wanted to enter that mysterious world and gain further knowledge, he would definitely go to Guling Quest Company in the future. Before he knew it, he had reached the door of the Mist and Rose Hotel. Convinced that no one was following him at this time, he walked into the hotel lobby. Just as Sean was about to open the glass door of the Mist and Roses Hotel, a thin figure pushed open the door from inside. His dark skin smiled and said, "Welcome, sir. Do you have a reservation?" The South Del Continent boy in the red doorman suit enthusiastically took the travel bag in Sean's hand and welcomed him into the lobby. Sean patted the raindrops on his body. "Yes." The doorman boy with Lion written on the nameplate on his chest sent Sean to the front desk. "Sir, wait here first, I'll take you to your room after checking in." After Sean thanked Leon, he found that an old couple was checking in front of him, so he looked around. The lobby of the hotel is not large, but the decoration is extraordinarily elegant. The dark red carpet, the burning fireplace, the temperate warm lighting, and the well-toned landscape paintings on the walls create a sense of tranquility and comfort. Sean suddenly noticed that the old couple in front raised their voices. They were talking aloud in Gaul, obviously losing their patience. There were two women standing inside the front desk. The lady in charge of the front desk was wearing a red suit, the other was wearing a black dress and a string of pearl necklaces. She had pretty eyebrows and seemed not to be a staff member. The two of them are helpless now. It is obvious that they do not understand Gaul and cannot communicate with the old couple. Sean just wanted to check in as soon as possible, so he took the initiative to walk forward and politely asked the old couple in Gaul. Seeing that someone could understand their words, their attitude softened and they expressed their strength. The two ladies at the front desk looked at each other and breathed a sigh of relief. They looked at Sean, who communicated with the old couple in Gaul, with bright eyes, with admiration and gratitude in their eyes. Soon, Sean figured out what was going on, so he turned to the lady at the front desk and said, "The room they booked by letter is for next week, but they came early, so they want to check in early." The lady at the front desk who had been unable to find the old couple's name finally understood, flipped through the reservation booklet, found the old couple's name, and started to check in. During this time, the woman in the black dress walked out of the front desk with a bright smile on her face. "Men who speak Gaul are very attractive. Have you been there?" Sean shook the woman's outstretched hand, slender and cold. "As a foreign correspondent, I spent 2 years in Gaul. The food there is delicious." A light flashed in the woman's green eyes. "You are a reporter." Sean knew that in Newlander, the status of reporters gradually increased with the development of the media industry, and was more respected than in Continental. Sean smiled. "Forget it, it's just a tabloid reporter." "My name is Sean, what's your name?" "My name is Daisy, and I am the owner of this hotel. In order to express our gratitude, we will give you a free room upgrade. I hope you will like it. In addition, if you have any needs here, just tell the service staff directly you are my honored guest. Xiaoan raised his eyebrows slightly, but he didn't expect that he was just doing a favor at will, and he could not help but sigh that he was lucky. After checking in, Daisy personally instructed Little Lion to take Sean upstairs. After receiving the boss's instructions, Little Leon laughed with two more white teeth. Sean's room was upgraded to a higher floor. When he entered the room, he couldn't help but be slightly surprised. This VIP room on the 20th floor actually has a large floor-to-ceiling window. From the window, you can see the dimly lit New York City scene nearby, as well as the dock area and the bay in the distance. The view is good. After taking the tip, Little Leon quietly exited the room. Feeling a little tired, Sean let out a long sigh, sorted out his messy thoughts, took a hot bath, changed into pajamas, and sat at the desk. He wants to plan tomorrow's trip. The first stop was without a doubt the Precepts in New Testament City. As a constitutional country, the Precepts Institute is an institution responsible for social order, and Sean wants to report Aaliyah's disappearance. Second stop. Sean took out Aaliyah's previous letter with the Newlander Poetry Society and looked at the address of the other party's letter. 95 Sequoia Street. On the second stop, Sean intends to go directly to this address of the Poetry Association. It's likely that the Society's receptionist has seen area, and his own investigation can begin there. I hope there won't be any danger. After a spiritual journey, Sean can't completely trust anyone now. Even the attractive Lady Daisy, although the other party took the initiative to show her kindness, she was still defensive. There is no way, the disappearance of Aaliyah and the frame-up that she encountered, the whole thing is really foggy, so I can only try my best to be careful. Sean felt a little tired, so he lay on the bed and turned off the light. In the darkness, he couldn't help but turn his attention to the faintly glowing symbol in his consciousness. This experience is very magical. If it weren't for the existence of this symbol, Sean would never have found such a space in his consciousness. When he concentrated on observing, he seemed to be close to the symbol and could observe it more clearly. It is indeed very much like an abstract candlestick, or a simplified totem, exuding a faint blue light. Sean was fascinated, his attention seemed to be thrown into it. Then, he was surprised to find that part of his senses pervaded the outside of the body, as if floating above the body. www.mtlnovel.com. It felt like a part of the soul was out of the body, just above the body. Floating. Sean quickly retracted his attention, pulled away from the symbol, and his soul came back properly in an instant. What's going on? Sean's surprise was no less than the first time he saw the true face of spiritual realm. Although I don't know what happened, Sean knew that the operation just now didn't seem to cause any harm to him. With a bit of caution, Sean once again poured his attention into the symbols. Once again, he felt that part of his soul seemed to diffuse out of his body, like a cloud with no fixed shape. He was still able to control his body, so he tried to open his eyes and saw a mass of sparkling, pale blue void-like matter floating in front of him. This is my soul. Sean looked at the blue cloud floating in front of him in surprise. Shouldn't the soul be in a fixed shape? Shouldn't it just stay in the body? How can my soul show such a trait? He tried to control it with his mind, and the blue cloud really fluttered and changed shape according to his mind. Is this symbol a tool? Can it achieve various functions of the soul? While thinking about it, Sean extended one of the tentacles of the blue cloud to the ceiling, penetrating the roof without any obstacles. He can't see the scene upstairs through the tentacles of his soul, but after passing through the ceiling for a moment, he can clearly hear the people upstairs, walking to the bathroom in slippers, turning on the tap, like close to my ear. Sean knows that others cannot see his soul. The tentacles of the soul passing through the wall became his hidden ears. Your own soul can be extended and become a hidden ear. The discovery left Sean's head a little dizzy, a little unreal. He tried to concentrate the diffused soul and extend it outward. Due to the limitation of volume, although the blue cloud has become the thickness of the wrist, it can only achieve an eavesdropping distance of 10 meters at most. Voice is not clear. 10 meters ignores the eavesdropping of obstacles. Sean manipulated the slender soul tentacles at the moment and walked around. Yes, Mr. Lehman, I can draw up the contract tomorrow. Oh dear, I love you, oh. That guest at 703 is really annoying. He complained all day long about our poor cleaning. Another home run. Jason Weir of the New York Yankees hit another hit. Sean's feeling is a little strange now. The thinly shaped soul belt is like an antenna, and is constantly adjusted by Sean. The content heard is also like an FM radio, changing with the movement of the antenna. Since almost all the soul belts of about 10 meters can receive the vibration of sound, many sounds are overlapping, and Sean needs to distinguish carefully before hearing a specific sound. Sean also discovered that his diffused soul can not only capture the vibration of sound, but also a certain sense of touch. For example, when he sweeps the bathroom, he can feel the changes in temperature and humidity. It's like extending an invisible sensory system. However, the diffuse state of the soul consumes a lot of energy. It didn't take long for Sean to feel a little tired, so he withdrew his soul and withdrew from the symbol. Lying in the dark, Sean's thoughts were surging. What does this symbol represent? Why can it not only stabilize the soul, but also realize this diffuse state? Has it always existed in my body? Was it awakened because of the impact of the resentful spirit? Sean turned over, and he realized that there would be no result if he thought about it now. What he needed more at the moment was sleep. In any case, this soul dispersion state is also a special ability. Although it cannot be used to protect itself, it has an additional tool for collecting information. It's impossible to know its origin and principle now. It's better to take a good rest. There are still many things to do tomorrow. Thinking like this, maybe it was because he just used the diffuse state to consume a lot of experience, and Sean soon fell asleep. Sean asked for a wake-up call and breakfast service before checking in. Early in the morning, he was woken up by the doorbell. Opening the door, a waitress pushed the morning cart and put the warm toast and fried eggs on Sean's table. With freshly brewed coffee, he casually flipped through the newspapers that were delivered together. Sean finished his breakfast quickly, put on his coat, and took a briefcase with documents and went out. The New York City Discipline Institute is 3 blocks away from the Fog and Rose Hotel. Sean followed the flow of people to work and took the newly built tram to the vicinity of the Discipline Institute. The New Testament City Precepts office is a rather Gothic-style building, with a dripping gargoyle sitting on the top of the column on the wall. Going up the stairs, Sean could see a diamond-shaped shield hanging directly above the gate of the Discipline Institute. The vertical diamonds represent the Father Keen/Salvatorium and the Court of God. The shield on the diamond is the symbol of the precepts. In Newlander, the constitutional country of God, the Holy Father Keen and the Salvation Church are the supreme beings. Religious belief is above everything else, and it has penetrated into every aspect of this country. Even the administrative agencies specializing in public security have a strong color of faith. Beneath the diamond-shaped shield is the motto of the precepts: serve the authority of God and the peace of man. Sean looked up at the huge shield, walked through the hurried people, and walked into the hall. Even in the early morning, the hall of the Discipline Center was full of people and noisy. According to the hanging sign, Sean found the missing case report. After waiting for a few people, it was finally Sean's turn. He described what happened to the dark-skinned Arab female police officer, and then handed Aaliyah's photo to her. The black female police officer listened very carefully, recorded Aaliyah's situation with a typewriter, and collected the photos. She said to Sean, "We will send your sister's information and photos to all the precincts. Once there is news, we will contact the phone number you left, okay?" Sean left the extension in his room and the phone number at the front desk of Mist and Roses. Just as Sean was about to thank him, he suddenly heard a familiar female voice. "Sean, is it you? Why did you come to the precepts?" Did you encounter any trouble? Sean turned her head. Miss Daisy was wearing a black and white dress today and a stylish wide-brimmed hat on her head. Next to her was a middle-aged man with a mustache in a neat police uniform, and his epaulets had several diamonds. Sean remembered the old driver George who wanted to murder him, and he didn't intend to tell others about Aaliyah easily, but Sean realized that Miss Daisy could not be an accomplice of those people, because if she wanted to murder herself, last night alone in the guest room is the best chance to rest. Since she's not an accomplice of those people, and the man beside her seems to be a high-ranking person, then revealing it to her should help me find Aaliyah. These thoughts flashed in an instant, and Sean told Daisy about his sister's disappearance. The officers of the discipline office beside Daisy also listened carefully. After listening to Sean's narration, Daisy had already covered her mouth with her gloved hand. She was obviously a little surprised. I didn't know that such a thing happened. She turned to the officer beside her and said, Director Flake, Sean is a kind-hearted young man. He came to us for his sister across the ocean. Look, can you help him? Chief Flake nodded, leaned over and said something to the black female indoctrination officer, then picked up the file bag containing Aria's materials. We will give priority to this case. Flake took a photo patting Sean's arm. Sean, don't worry, we will do our best to find your sister. Unexpectedly, he could get the promise of the director. Sean was a little excited and thanked him repeatedly. The heart that had been a little anxious because of Aria's disappearance was also greatly relieved. Daisy looked at Aaliyah's photo. What a lovely girl, look, she has a thick, long, and beautiful braid. Aaliyah treasures her hair very much. Thinking of the way his sister combed her long hair and grimaced at him in the mirror, he smiled bitterly. Daisy handed back the photo. Sean, do you still have Aaliyah's photo? You can give me a few more, and I have some ideas. Detective friends, I will ask them to find them too. Sean quickly pulled out a few photos of Aaliyah, and handed them over to Daisy along with the one just now. Daisy reassured a few more words, and then left with Chief Flake. Sean, who walked out of the precepts, felt hope for the first time since it was confirmed that Aaliyah was missing. Aaliyah, you must be safe. Sean said silently. Uyuganshu www.uyuganshu.com felt that a large search net was slowly being rolled out. After grabbing a bite to eat, Sean took the tram to number 95 Sequoia Road, where the Newlander Poetry Society is located. Sequoia Road is in the west of New York City, far from the pier. Sean took a car to get there. After getting off the bus and walking for about 15 minutes, Sean arrived at number 95. When he arrived, he felt his heart sink. The building in front of it, with its charred exterior walls and broken doors and windows, apparently suffered a fire a long time ago, and has not been used for a long time. This is a fake address. Sean smashed his fist in his heart. This poetry association is indeed a fake. The feeling of being teased and deceived burned Sean's heart, and he was extremely angry, cursing the unknown deceiver and the organization hiding in the shadows. Although he knew it was a fake address at first glance, Sean still planned to walk into this long-abandoned building in disrepair after the fire to check it out. Not for anything else, just for fear of missing even a little clue. Just as he was about to step over the faded blocking tape, and sat on the corner next to him, a drunk homeless man shouted inarticulately, "Don't go in there, burn people to death." Sean stopped at the gate, thinking of the terrifying spiritual room on Central Avenue. He hesitated. There must be a spiritual room in this building that once caught fire, right? Sean just hesitated for a while. He thought of the unknown symbol in his body, and a little more courage. Catherine said that I was introduced to the spiritual world before. There is no one else here. Even if there is a spiritual world, I can't get in either. After thinking about it, he stepped over the blocking tape and walked into the building. I don't know how long the flames here have been extinguished, but there is still a lingering smell of fireworks in the abandoned building. It can be seen that this place used to be a textile factory. The scorched textile machines, like the large animal bones left after the wildfire, have now been covered with thick dust. The place was so quiet and depressing that it made people shudder. If it weren't for the sunlight streaming in through the broken windows, Sean wouldn't dare to explore it. As Sean walked, he extended his soul, explored everywhere, trying to find any clues. After all, area most likely came here based on the address, and maybe there will be some clues left. Although he knew the probability was very small, in order to find area, Sean didn't want to miss even the tiniest possibility. From the scene of the fire, this textile factory has been abandoned for a long time. Why hasn't it been acquired or disposed of? Sean searched with such a question, extending to the sole tentacles on the third floor, and felt a stinging pain that seemed to be burned. Is there a fire? In order to reduce consumption, Sean restrained his soul. Guessing that there may be a homeless man here to build a fire to keep out the cold, so he went up the stairs to the third floor. The third floor seemed to be where the workers lived back then. The burn marks here were particularly severe. Almost all the walls were burnt to a pitch-black color, and there were rows of deformed lockers along the walls. Several beams of skylight shone down from the hollow skylights on the roof, illuminating the fluttering ashes in the air. Sean frowned in the shadows. Just now my soul tentacles clearly felt burning. Why didn't I find any flames when I came up? In order to verify that it wasn't his hallucination, Sean tried to diffuse his soul. First, the soul felt a wave of heat, and everything in front of him suddenly burned violently. Dozens of people who were charred to black and the flames on their bodies were standing and facing Sean. Due to the panic, Sean's soul suddenly came back. There were still dark walls, fluffy ash, the flames, and the burned people were gone. Sean's nerves suffered a strong shock, and he was suddenly sweating profusely and panting heavily. What was it just now? Beads of sweat fell from Sean's forehead. He seemed to have shuttled back to the scene of the fire just now, but it felt very strange. He recalled for a while, and soon found something strange. He could hear the sound of the flames burning, but those who were burned by the flames just looked at themselves silently, without any movement or sound. This feeling is so weird. Sean wants to turn around and escape from here. But his reason told him that if there was danger here, then when he stepped into the third floor or saw the fire field through the symbol, it had already happened, so he wouldn't let himself stay here for so long. Moreover, in addition to finding that those who were burned did not make any sound, Sean also discovered something keenly. He closed his eyes and recalled the scene just now. It was the only quiet thing in the turbulent flame. He saw a pair of eyes. Those people are covered in flames, and every inch of their skin has turned into coke. Only those eyes can prove that they were once human beings. Those eyes stared at him. Sean knew, those were the eyes that wanted to say something. They seemed to want to tell me something. Sean was taken aback. He looked around and found no danger. Thinking of going to witness the fire again, his instinct was somewhat resistant. Sean can only take a few deep breaths, forcibly suppressing his panic, and throwing his soul into the symbol. The whirring of the flames sounded in his ears, the heat wave hit him, and Sean slowly opened his eyes. Those dozens of people who were burnt to pieces, covered in flames, stood quietly in the burning room. This time, Sean took a closer look and found that these people seemed to be women in terms of body shape and height. Moreover, it's not that they don't make a sound, it's that they don't make a sound. Their charred faces, where their mouths should be, only have a few folds left. They lost their mouths and couldn't make a sound. Letting the flames rage on their bodies, they looked at Sean quietly, as if they were complaining about what happened to them. Just when Sean couldn't bear the heat wave and wanted to withdraw from this weird perspective, dozens of women raised one of their hands at the same time, pointing to the same direction from different angles. Sean squinted and looked in the direction they were pointing, where there was a metal box. After exiting his soul vision, Sean retched violently. Humans have the ability to empathize. Seeing the same kind of people being burned, Sean's mind was severely impacted, and even induced a violent physiological reaction. He vomited almost all the bread and sausages he had eaten before, and the violent feeling of vomiting made him a little awake. Those aren't resentful spirits, resentment spirits won't be so quiet. Sean recalled the faceless things that wailed among the spirits on the Central Avenue. Those poor women didn't continue to be tortured, it seemed to be just a moment ago. A symbolic scene. But, what does that symbolize? The covered martyr? People who can't tell what happened to them? It's very possible. But there's too little information at the moment, and then I'll investigate in depth what happened here. www.mtlnovel.com now. Sean's eyes focused on the iron box. I have to see if there are any what. Sean stood up with his still trembling body, passed through the beams of light cast by the skylights, walked to the innermost wall, and looked at the iron box. This is also an object burned beyond recognition by the fire. It may have been used to hold textiles or sundries before. Sean smelled an unpleasant smell. What the is going on here? As he spoke, he lifted the lid of the iron box. Inside the box was the corpse of a young woman with a purplish surface and bulging limbs. Sean just felt a little dizzy and wanted to recognize it, but he didn't dare to recognize it. He first saw the thick and long braids on her head, and the dress she liked to wear with a lace-trimmed collar and lilies embroidered on the skirt. Sean once laughed at her that this dress was a little dirty, but she liked it very much. Now, this white dress is covered in blood, because it has been stuffed in this box for too long, and the blood has turned black. Then he saw that there were countless scars on her body. It seemed that she had been scratched countless times by a sharp blade, and her whole body was ripped apart, including her face. Oh, that face! Sean didn't realize his eyes were blurry. The face was also cut several long and deep cuts with a knife, and the small nose was gone. Since she had been dead for a while, there was already corrupt gas in her body, and her whole body was swollen, as if she had gained weight. Sean fell to the ground. Aaliyah. He didn't expect that the worst situation, which he had never dared to think about, would be smashed down without any expectation. When Sean walked out of the abandoned building, a drunk man on the corner came over and stared into Sean's eyes. Did you see the flames too? Did you see them too? Sean didn't want to talk, just walked straight. He was going to call the police. The drunk man shouted behind him, they were burned to death by the fire. It was caused by those big men. The drunk man raised the bottle and took a sip. But I can only watch, there is no way. There is no way. The drunk man muttered and returned to his corner. After receiving the call, the education officers came quickly. Sean tried to keep himself calm as he narrated to them, but Arya's body kept flashing in his mind. Flawed skin, swollen body. Why did this happen? Who did it? Why Arya? These angry, sad, and extremely confused questions kept pouring out and forcibly taking over his attention. He expressed it very hard, and paused several times. But the indoctrination officer and the forensic doctor who had seen the corpse listened to his remarks in silence. Sean, we all know, you go and take a rest. A senior education officer patted Sean on the back. Sean felt that everything in front of him was a bit illusory. As he walked out the door, there were several more cars from the discipline office, as if he didn't see it. Standing on the street, Sean felt a little dizzy. Reaching into his inner pocket for a cigarette, he felt empty before remembering that Aaliyah had urged him to quit smoking a year ago. My sister's face flashed before my eyes again. Seemingly sweating, Sean pulled the collar, which was already wet. The indoctrination officer named Link, who was in charge of the scene, found Sean and took him back to the 9th Avenue precepts. He admired Sean's calmness and restraint, and said in a low voice, the forensic doctor has completed a preliminary examination. According to the condition of the body, it can be known that Aaliyah's death was 10 days ago. 10 days ago? Sean then realized that Arya had died shortly after sending her last telegram to her home. Are you aware of her social status? Does she know anyone of the opposite here? Has she ever had a grudge against others? In order to investigate, the education officer Link asked Sean a lot of questions, and Sean told the truth about what he knew. But Sean knew that this information would not be helpful in investigating the cause of Aaliyah's death. Because until now, he didn't know who would do such a thing to Arya. After the questioning, Link said, "This is obviously a vicious crime, and Aaliyah's body will be investigated at the autopsy for about a week to collect evidence, and then it can be cremated. You wait in New York City. I'll inform you after the investigation of the body is over." Sean left the Precepts Center. He didn't know where to go, so he let himself walk around on the street. His mind has never been so chaotic. The mystery of Aaliyah's death has not been resolved, and the pent-up sadness, pent-up anger, and deep self-blame have not been released. My kind-hearted sister, why should she suffer this? Who is it and why do you do this? If I could come with her, this wouldn't happen. The intense emotions were mixed together, as if it had turned into a monster, constantly gnawing at Sean's heart. He even really felt some discomfort in his heart, so he had to stop for a while. Then, Sean tried hard to force himself not to indulge in his emotions, but to look forward and think forward. Next, we can only wait for the investigation of the Discipline Institute. After the autopsy, I will take Arya's ashes back to my hometown. After burying Aaliyah, I will return to New York City. I will find the murderer and make him regret being born in this world. Sean struggled with the constant surge of pain, and kept his feet on the ground. When he got out of his contemplation, Sean found that it was already dark. He had already walked back to 9th Avenue, and the neon sign of Fog and Roses was not far away. Sean went straight back to the room and fell asleep. There was a knock on the door, and sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows. When Sean woke up, he was still feeling fine, but suddenly remembered everything that happened, and his buoyant emotions fell into the ice cave. After eating breakfast, Sean suddenly thought of Miss Daisy. She may not know what happened. Tell her as soon as possible, lest her friends waste their efforts. Sean tidied himself up a little and walked out of the door. He planned to go to the front desk to inquire about Miss Daisy's location. As soon as he arrived in the lobby, he saw Miss Daisy in an emerald dress, walking over with a smile on his face. "Sean, how are you? Any news?" Sean tried his best to smile and said, "Actually, I have some news." Miss Daisy seemed to be in a good mood. "I also have something to tell you, let's go to my office." Daisy turned around, her high heels clattered in the corridor, and took Sean to her office. There is a fragrance in the office, which makes people feel at ease. The light was dim. Daisy strode to the window and opened the curtains, and the morning sun slanted in. Daisy passed Sean, "Coffee or tea?" "Coffee, no sugar." "Thank you." Daisy flicked the coffee pot with her fingers and felt slightly hot. She was very satisfied with the time the assistant brewed the coffee. Seeing Daisy sitting with her fingers lightly, Sean felt a little envious. She didn't have to go through those, she didn't have to see her beloved family suffer like that. He now envies almost everyone. Anger and sadness appeared uncontrollably. He breathed slowly, tried his best to calm down, and let himself be distracted. Daisy came over with 2 cups and saucers. Sean got up to take it for her, and put the coffee on the glass coffee table in front of her. "So," Daisy sat on the sofa opposite with a look of anticipation, "what's your progress?" Sean considered how much he should tell Daisy, so he subconsciously said, "It's a long story." "You just said you have something to tell me, what is it?" Daisy smiled mysteriously, stood up, and said, "I believe Aaliyah will be found soon." Sean was a little confused. Did Daisy's detective friend find useful clues? But, Aaliyah is dead, what use are those clues? Out of courtesy, Sean still wanted to see Daisy's harvest in person. Daisy walked behind her desk, opened the drawer, and took out a file bag. "I asked my friends to find Aaliyah, but they were lucky and found this soon." While talking, Daisy walked back, took out the contents of the file bag and handed it to Sean. That's a few photos. Sean looked at the first photo, which appeared to be an outdoor cocktail party, with people chatting over cocktails on a beautifully manicured lawn. Just as Sean was about to ask what was so special about this photo, his eyes were drawn to a face in the crowd. It was a round face that was often misjudged by age, with thick and long tresses tucked behind his head, and a somewhat indifferent look in the crowd of strangers. The girl in the photo looks very similar to Aaliyah, almost exactly the same. Sean looked at the next few pictures again. They were all taken in the same time period and in the same place. What they have in common is that the girl wearing a black skirt and leather shoes with a cold face was photographed, and beside her, there was a tall and thin middle-aged man with a flat top hat and a tuxedo. This girl, Sean pointed to the photo, looks a lot like Arya. Yes. Daisy turned to the same angle as Sean and looked at the photo seriously. Aaliyah is a little beauty. After my friend saw her photo, he thought he had seen it somewhere, and he found this place. A few pictures. Daisy was so close, Sean could smell the faint scent of perfume on her body. Sean can be sure that the one in the photo is Aaliyah. Because not only the faces are exactly the same, but that long braid is rare. This photo, although it is impossible to change the fact that Aaliyah is dead, but it may help to restore what happened to Arya before she was killed, and thus find the murderer. Sean nodded slightly, grateful from the bottom of his heart for Daisy's help. He felt it was time to tell Daisy the truth. Daisy. Daisy continued, with this photo, you should be able to find Aaliyah soon. This photo was taken at the Long Island Bill banquet 3 days ago. If you go to inquire about it, you will definitely know the whereabouts of Arya. Sean was stunned. 3 days ago? A photo taken 3 days ago? Instructor Link's voice sounded in Sean's mind. According to the condition of the corpse, it can be known that Arya died 10 days ago. Arya died 10 days ago, how could she have appeared at the banquet 3 days ago? Sean's movements stopped, staring blankly at Daisy's profile. Arya died 10 days ago, how could she appear at the banquet 3 days ago? The huge question almost burst Sean's head, causing him to fall into a brief daze. Daisy, who was staring at the photo, suddenly found that Sean was not talking, and turned to look. She saw Sean's stagnant expression, mixed with shock, doubt, fear, and deep puzzlement, as if she had seen a ghost. This expression made Daisy a little uneasy, and her eyes flickered. Sean, what's wrong with you? Sean came back to his senses. Sorry, things are a little weird. He fell down on the sofa, and while sorting out his thoughts, he told Daisy what he found yesterday. After hearing Sean say that Aaliyah's body was found in the iron box, Daisy covered her mouth and sat down slowly. After speaking, there was a terrible silence in the office. The two of them couldn't understand what happened, and they both looked at the photos scattered on the coffee table in silence. Daisy first broke the silence. The corpse in the iron box, you said the face was scratched and it was swollen badly. Could it be Arya's corpse? You're wrong. Sean frowned. Aaliyah's hair color and length are very rare, and the clothes that the corpse was wearing were Aaliyah's. If it wasn't Aaliyah, there was only one possibility. Someone specially found a girl of the same age as Aaliyah and with the same hair, put on Aaliyah's clothes, and faked her body. But, the point is, why did they do this? Thinking entered the fog again. When Sean looked at the photos on the table, he felt a little shudder. The Arya in the photo, the cold expression and eyes, were too different from the usual Arya. Who is Aaliyah? In the end, what happened? The old questions have not been resolved, and new questions have emerged. However, for Sean, although it is still uncertain, there is still a possibility that Aaliyah is alive, which is great news. As if a ray of light came in, Sean's mood was at the bottom of the valley, and he became a little more active. You just said, who held this banquet? Long Island Bill. There's only one Bill on Long Island, and he's a famous person who likes to hold this kind of banquet, almost once a week. Maybe ask the people at the banquet, ask that Bill, and you'll know more. Daisy shrugged. after my friend found this photo, he went to visit a few people who attended the banquet that day. It's a pity that they have no impression of this girl. Maybe Bill or his housekeeper will know more. Sean realized that he should be personally responsible for the most critical investigation. Daisy, are you familiar with Bill? Can you arrange for me to meet him? Daisy nodded. I have business cooperation with him. However, he is busy, so I have to make an appointment with him. Sean, then please. I must talk to him. After saying goodbye to Daisy, Sean feels completely different from before. Aaliyah may still be alive. Although this is only a possibility, it is much better than the previous situation. Sean felt that he had come out of a little bit. Although he had not yet completely landed, he had at least returned to a world worth continuing to explore. He clenched his fists, made a lot of guesses, and his thoughts returned to the previous track. If the corpse is indeed not Aaliyah, and the person who appeared at the reception is her, then there must be an unknown secret. Perhaps, that body was deliberately placed there for me to discover? From this point of view, it still makes sense that I deduced that there is an organization behind all of this. Sean remembered his previous plan. If Arya is still alive, then I'm still in danger now, and I have to go to Guling Quest to find Catherine. Sean quickly found the address of Guling Quest in the yellow pages of the room. During this period, he was surprised to find that there were many so-called exploration companies in New York City. Sean called Guling Quest and set off after making an appointment. I took the tram to Wall Street, not far from Central Street. There are many high-rise buildings here. When I looked up, I could only see the geometric sky outlined by the edges of the buildings. For some reason, Sean felt that the surrounding tall buildings that blocked his view were like high walls, and he felt like he had fallen into a huge maze. Wall Street is located in the city centre, which is one of the commercial centres of the whole New Zealand. The Rockfields Consortium, the Pacific Railway Company, the Morgan Dahl Bank, the headquarters of all the world's leading companies are almost all here. 50 years ago, in pursuit of wealth, people would choose to head west, become a gold prospector, or build oil pipelines. Now is the era when the oil industry, the securities market and the exploration industry are prosperous. People with dreams of making a fortune have become car salesmen, securities managers, or explorers one after another. Sean was standing downstairs in the Explorer Center building at this time. He didn't realize that the mysterious exploration industry had developed so professionally and hugely. Among the people entering and leaving the gate of the Explorer Center, many people wore masks of different shapes. Some masks are parrot faces made of colorful feathers, some are gray wolves wearing cowboy hats, and some are like witch doctors, with a wooden board covering their faces and rough outlines of the facial features with various colors of paint. Sean has the illusion that he is heading to the masquerade party. But these masked people are all wearing well-fitting suits, sturdy leather jackets, or plain robes, and they are in a hurry, obviously in a working state, not at all leisurely to participate in the dance. When Sean looked at the passing masks with curious eyes in the crowd, he heard a familiar female voice behind him. Your parents didn't teach you, is it rude to stare at others? Sean looked back and saw Catherine wearing skinny jeans, a long-sleeved shirt and a brown coat. She was now wearing a white opera mask outlined by gold threads and embellished with black pearls. Sean still remembers that lazy voice, sharp red lips, and slender figure, so he knew it was Catherine. Why are you wearing? Sean gestured on his face. Catherine sighed, damn it, I let you see my real face before, maybe I should kill you. Exploration is a high-risk industry. Many colleagues will covet your gains. When working as an explorer, wearing a mask is a way to protect everyone. Catherine walked in front, and Sean tried his best to keep his eyes from staring at her too proud lower back. Moreover, there are many people who regard explorers as their sideline and are unwilling to reveal their identities. Catherine led Sean into the hall. In addition, explorers usually act in small groups, and masks can quickly let teammates know your function and rating. Function and rating. Sean shuttled as fast as he could in the crowd to avoid getting lost, and accidentally bumped into a burly man with a bronze mask, feeling like he had bumped into a wall. The man didn't seem to notice, just continued chatting with his companions. Catherine stopped and waited for a while, then clicked on her own mask. For example, my mask, Pale Aria, is also called Young Actress. It means that I am a junior explorer, only Jack level, guard class. The function is actor. Just as Sean was about to ask further questions, Catherine raised a hand. I won't tell you about functions and ratings, the concepts in the industry. If you talk too much for a while, you won't understand. You know that I am an explorer. At the same time, I am also a professional actor, and my identity as an actor is helpful for the exploration work, that's all. Sean seemed to understand, and followed Catherine into the elevator. There were 3 people wearing black cloaks and masks of Dr. Bird's beak in different colors, which made the atmosphere of the elevator so strange. www.mtlnovel.com. The elevator reached the 15th floor, and Catherine took Sean out. Took the elevator. On the oncoming door, there is a prominent metal sign, Ghouling Quest Company since 1912. Catherine rushed to sit at the reception behind the door. The receptionist, wearing butterfly-rimmed glasses, nodded and led Sean directly in. Exploration Company, explorers, what do they do? Sean finally asked the question he had always wanted to ask. Strange events need professionals to solve. Some people need bodyguards who can drive away resentful spirits, scientific research teams need to hire esoteric experts to accompany them, and some public areas are threatened by strange forces. The court will also choose to entrust these troublesome matters give us. These all mean large commissions. Not to mention, behind most of the bizarre incidents, there is a valuable mysterious legacy. Explorers are experts in solving strange events. The exploration industry is an industry with high risks but also high rewards. So, do you understand? Sean nodded. Professional consultants involved in the mysterious field. Let's put it this way. Catherine pushed open the door of an office. It's just us advisors who carry exorcism pistols and ritual weapons with us. Catherine closed the door of the office, took off her coat, took off her mask, turned around and pulled out the dagger with intricately carved patterns from the scabbard under her flank, and pressed the tip of the dagger directly under Sean's flank, forcing Sean into the office corner of the wall. Through the shirt, I can also feel the cold touch of the dagger. What are you doing? Catherine's face was indifferent. Sean, it's not necessarily you who came back from the spiritual realm. The real you should have died in the spirit. The dagger was so tight that Sean didn't dare to move. Catherine said, Sean, maybe you don't know it yourself. But you may be a dead body now. It's just that you still have unfinished business, so your obsession got you out. Sean probably understood what Catherine meant, but he knew that what Catherine said was not true, because only he knew that there was a mysterious symbol guarding his soul. Catherine continued, I clearly saw that you turned back, so it is impossible for you to come out of that spiritual realm. I said, unless you are a king-level explorer or above. But even that strong, the person will also faint due to the huge impact on the soul, or at least become weak. And you are just an ordinary person. So I suspected at the time that you were just a body that came out with obsession. However, I was also very weak at the time, so I let you go. I planned to deal with you in the next few days, but I didn't expect you to come by yourself. At this time, Sean was not only nervous, but also a little embarrassed, because Catherine not only held him with a dagger, but his chest was squeezed hard enough. No, you misunderstood, I really came out. You are a professional, there must be a way to check on me. Rather than we tell each other stories, let's check directly. Catherine was silent, staring at Sean with blue eyes, as if thinking. Then she took 2 steps back, but did not let go of the dagger in her hand. She also kept her eyes fixed on Sean. From her drawer, she took out an olive-shaped mineral like rough crystal. This is the resonant crystal that can perceive the soul. You hold it, and then imagine injecting the self into it if you still have a self. Sean ignored the sarcasm in Catherine's words, took the resonant crystal that she handed over, closed his eyes, and imagined pouring his soul into it. He didn't dare to be light-hearted. After all, Catherine's eyes and the dagger in her hand were twinkling. Cold light. Sean suddenly felt a slight numbness in his hand and opened his eyes. The resonant crystal began to vibrate slightly, and the color of aurora appeared in the chaotic crystal. In front of Catherine, her eyes brightened. The vibration is getting stronger and stronger, and the color of the aurora is getting brighter and brighter. Sean is even a little afraid that this resonance crystal will explode in his hand. Snapped. Cracks appeared on the resonant crystal, and the vibration and light disappeared. With heartache and shock mixed on her face, Catherine walked over in 2 steps and snatched the cracked resonance crystal. This is very expensive. Sean felt that he often made Catherine yell, and he felt a little embarrassed. However, Catherine's eyes quickly left the crystal. She stared at Sean. It can make the resonance crystal overload and shatter. Your soul strength is more than 5 times that of ordinary people. Are you really not an explorer? Sean shook his head blankly, wondering if that symbol caused it. Catherine saw that Sean wasn't lying, and murmured, "Are you a genius? Even without training, your soul is born stronger than others." After disarming, Catherine retracted the dagger into its scabbard and let Sean sit down. She was very interested in Sean now. After greeting the receptionist at the front desk to prepare 2 cups of coffee, Catherine sat on the sofa and crossed her hands. "Let's talk about your story." On the one hand, Catherine is the one who wants to save herself from the spiritual world. On the other hand, to open the door to the mysterious world, Sean needs Catherine as a guide. So Sean thought it was wise to be frank with Catherine, so he told Catherine the cause and effect of his trip to New Zealand. However, he did not mention the symbols in his body, nor did he say that his soul had different characteristics, but only said that he felt that the soul was extremely stable and it seemed that it was not easy to be taken away. After listening to Sean's story, Catherine said, "Your judgment should be correct from what happened. Your sister's disappearance must have involved mysterious events. And you're right, those people won't give up easily, they'll definitely want to get rid of you. You're still dangerous. My suggestion to you is to hire a scout as your bodyguard. But this cost, I'm afraid you can't afford it now." With the existence of symbols, Sean feels that he is personally involved in the mystery, and while improving his self-protection ability, he can also dig out the secrets about his own soul. "I think, instead of hiring others to protect me, it is better for me to become an explorer myself." Catherine was surprised by Sean's thoughts, and raised her eyebrows. "It sounds like a good idea. After all, you have a strong soul, and you are a good candidate for becoming an explorer. There is a huge reward for training a qualified explorer for the company," and Catherine couldn't help but feel a little tempted. "If you want to get the explorer's license, you need to pass the industry assessment. Now you still need a lot of learning and training. It will only take 2 months for you to pass the industry assessment." 2 months. Sean knew that becoming a professional in any industry was not an overnight success. However, looking for Aliyah and self-defense, I can't allow myself to improve leisurely. He needs to become stronger in a short period of time, the sooner the better. Sean expressed her urgency. Catherine nodded her understanding and said, "I will teach you. As for how hard you have to work, it's up to you." Having said that, Catherine pulled out a few books from her bookshelf. The Explorer's Handbook, which is written here, are the basic rules of practitioners in the industry. From the origin and development direction of the industry, to the specification of the use of masks, etc., there are all in the manual. You must memorize them all. Sean took the handbook, which is a book with more than 400 pages thick with gilding and black seal. If you want to write down all of it, from the weight of the book, you know it is a very scary thing. The Chronicle of Occultism. This book not only introduces the origin and various concepts of occultism, but also records some basic techniques. You must understand all the bold concepts. Chronicle, as thick as a sea of words. Sean flipped through it, almost every page was bold. Book of Souls, Theology and Divinity, Summary of Research Reports on Ancient Gods, Use and Maintenance of Firearms and Ritual Weapons. 10 books, each of which is a tome, almost all of which must be understood thoroughly. Understand these, and you can pass the written test. Sean felt as if he was holding a pile of bricks. Even if all of these are replaced with Gallic bread, you won't be able to eat them in 2 months. Catherine shrugged, so I said 2 months is the fastest. The beautiful woman squinted and smirked. 2 months into the industry is the fastest record in the entire explorer industry. I wonder if you can break it. Sean put the book on Catherine's desk in anguish, feeling a little more pessimistic about his time in the industry. These are just written tests. Reading www.uugonshu.com. Catherine took a sip of coffee. If you want to become a qualified explorer, you have to pass a difficult practical test to prove your mental strength. Physical strength and combat skills are all over. Mental strength is the external manifestation of the strength of your soul. Your soul is very strong, and this is your advantage. But I suggest you continue to improve, and you will gain something from reading that Book of Souls. As for physical strength and combat skills, Catherine pinched Sean's body. It's pretty solid. Have you ever been in combat with firearms? When I was a child, I fought with my friends, and I used a slingshot to shoot birds, right? Catherine's icy blue eyes looked directly at Sean. I hope you can still maintain this sense of humor when facing the unknown or the family of the evil god. She stood up. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'll train your fighting and shooting. Sean looked at Catherine with some gratitude, and just wanted to say thank you. The tuition fee will be deducted from your future exploration dividends. After speaking, let Sean go out with a big stack of books. Before leaving, Catherine suddenly remembered something. Wait. She untied the dagger and scabbard tied to her shoulder, tied it to Sean, and said, "The sacred dagger is a ritual weapon that can hurt evil. You don't have the qualification to carry a gun, so I can only give it to you." This. Sean felt the temperature of the scabbard and was moved. It's not worth a lot of money. Catherine waved her hand. It's you, and. Catherine swallowed the words what's still worth. She didn't want Sean to know that she was interested in the bonuses for nurturing new recruits. You go. Catherine pushed Sean out. Try not to die. Sean, who left with the book in his arms, saw a very special thing in the lobby of the Explorer Center building. It was a large red iron cabinet with a glass window with light bulbs installed on the front, and different products were displayed on the window. Chinook smelling salts, 50 cents, first aid carbonated syrup, 50 cents, bottled holy water, 50 cents, holy light bullets, 1 NZD, demon hunting bullets, 1 NZD. Sean looked over one by one. The neon sign above the iron cabinet flashed, and the built-in gramophone sounded. Atom brand magic item vending machine, your good exploration partner. Sean was a little surprised. He had only seen a Coca-Cola vending machine, and he never thought that there would be such a machine that sells secret materials. Sacred goods vending machines are usually performed with magical techniques. A sturdy old man wearing a bowler hat, fluffy white beard and hair smiled beside him. You can find this in a twisted world or a terrifying spiritual world. Kind of a vending machine, so when you're a detective, remember to bring money with you when you're on a mission. Money can even flow through hell, the old adage always makes sense. These common senses are described in the handbook. The old man pointed at the book Sean was holding with his black cane. The old man seemed to want to use the vending machine, but Sean stepped aside. The old man stepped forward, stuffed 50-cent coins into the coin slot, pressed the mechanical button, and there was a sound of things rolling down from the vending machine. The old man placed the bottle of holy water he just bought on Sean's stack of books upright. I have a premonition that you will need this. Sean was dazed at the crystal clear holy water in the small glass bottle. Just as he was about to thank him, the old man with fluffy beard and hair had already walked away. There are some explorers. Sean looked at the direction the old man was leaving, searching for suitable words. Mysterious. Sean put the book down, picked up the glass bottle of holy water and looked at it for a while. The concentration of holy water is 8%, I entrust it to the Ryan Church to make it. When there is an evil violation, sprinkle the holy water on the target. Sure enough, it was an item used to exorcise evil spirits. Sean took the holy water bottle into his pocket, picked up the book and walked down the street. Although he is still standing outside the door of the mysterious world, with a dagger and a bottle of holy water on his body, Sean feels much more at ease than before. Back at the hotel, Sean's arms were very sore because he was holding the book all the way, but he had no plans to rest, but made a cup of coffee and sat at the desk. I don't have time to waste. Aria's whereabouts are still unknown, and that organization must still want to kill me. Sean took out the Book of Souls. The more you know, the more hope for me to survive. The concept of Book of Souls is not difficult, it is to analyze the essence and attributes of the soul and spirit from an academic point of view. To put it simply, the soul is the essence of human beings, the root of I, and it forms human consciousness and spirit. The spirit is not only manifested in the external personality, but also can protect the essence of people and stabilize the soul. The so-called spiritual strength is a manifestation of soul strength. A person with a strong soul must have a high mental strength, and a high mental strength shows a firm will, and will not be easily frightened in the face of terrifying things. After reading this, Sean realized his own problem. You can easily feel fear, and fear can easily defeat your defenses. These are all manifestations of low mental strength. His current mental strength is definitely not high, because whether he sees a collection of resentful spirits or the symbolic scene of the fire scene, he has a strong sense of panic. In that case, it is actually very easy to lose the soul. The reason why Sean has survived to this day is not because of his own mental strength, but because that symbol guards his soul that is actually crumbling. As for the fragmentation of the resonance crystal, it is not like Catherine said that his soul strength is stronger than that of ordinary people. Just because of the existence of symbols in the soul, the output power is very abundant. However, the power of symbols is limited. If he hesitated for a while, he would still lose his soul. Although there are symbols, the strength of the soul and spirit still depends on self-improvement. In the Book of Souls, meditation methods to enhance mental strength are recorded. According to the record, Sean sat and practiced for a while. It's not easy to get rid of distracting thoughts and enter a meditative state, but Sean has succeeded a few times. After entering the state of meditation, Sean found that the brightness of the symbol was obviously higher than usual, and there were bursts of warm currents pouring out of the symbol, nourishing the soul and spirit. In addition to the diffuse state, this symbol can also enhance the effect of meditation. After I get started with mysticism, I must figure out what it is. Sean was studying hard and didn't even leave the room to eat. www.mentalnovel.com. After watching it, he practiced the movements of drawing a knife, stabbing, and taking out a holy water bottle from his pocket. He did not improve his combat for the time being, the method of skills, so Sean hopes that he can do the basics well. It was getting dark. Sean felt that his eyes were a little swollen due to the long reading time. He closed the book, took a bath, and lay in bed ready to rest. It suddenly occurred to him that he still has a training program. So put your attention into the symbols and let your soul diffuse. Hey? It's a little strange. Sean opened his eyes and looked at the soul that only he could see, scattered above. It seems to have gotten bigger. Did the volume of the soul increase after just a few meditation trainings? Sean couldn't believe it, so he extended the soul and felt it carefully. When the soul reached the longest state, Sean found that the length was really extended by about half a meter. It seems that meditation can increase the size of the soul. My perception and eavesdropping abilities will increase with the mental strength. Sean lay on the bed, clenching his fists a little excitedly. Just like the first night, Sean controlled the slender soul antenna to explore around. He was not a voyeur, just to exercise his soul ability and ensure that there was no danger around him. After sweeping the surrounding rooms and grasping almost every neighbor's situation, he controlled the soul antenna to probe downward. According to the height of the building, the www.mtlnovel.com antenna should be located just near the restaurant. Sean heard a voice that was deliberately lowered, and his intuition told him that this way of speaking means that the speaker has a secret that cannot be publicized. So he adjusted the antenna to point in the direction of that voice. "This thing can't go wrong, you repeat what I said." The deliberately lowered voice became clear. The voice was thick, with a heavy Celtic accent. "Yes, sir." The reply's voice was a little low, like a woman's. "At noon the day after tomorrow, when Miss Daisy is not in the store, I will go to the precepts and find the crackdown on magical items crime." The department's education officer, reporting that the hotel has black market artifacts. Sean suddenly remembered whose voice it was, that Nandal Continental doorman, Little Leon. According to Sean's previous reading of the Explorer's Handbook, the divine power item is the kind of product he saw in the red vending machine during the day. However, those are relatively low-level consumables, and there are some high-value and powerful divine products. Due to the prosperity of the exploration industry and the frequent occurrence of strange events, divine power items are a huge market in New Zealand. Due to its certain danger, the sale of divine products can only be involved with the approval of the God Court, the central agency of the theocratic government of New Zealand. In the whole of New Zealand, only 8 companies have permission to sell magic products. In addition to these 8 companies, all the magical items manufactured and sold belong to the black market gods, and if they are found, they will face prison. Black market gods are similar in nature to illegal guns. Therefore, when Sean heard Little Leon say report and black market gods, he knew that things were not easy, so he concentrated his attention on eavesdropping.